Welcome back to Sports Talk with Puckett and Pontzer here on the airwaves of WXOU from the campus of Oakland University. We just had a long segment about the lack of production from several stars that I hold near and dear to my heart.
And from Tim's Twitter account.
Well, my Twitter account, if you want to follow me, is at Timothy_Pontzer. And unfortunately, in the last segment, Puckett took several out of context. He took one out of like the 30 I tweeted last night. That's, if you follow me, be prepared to get a lot of tweets regarding athletic events, and that's really it. If you come to me for the latest in pop culture, forget it. Or what I had for lunch, for that matter. But at Austin Puckett is one of my followers, and that's he brought up this segment about last segment about how I was not ripping into certain stars on the Pittsburgh Penguins for producing. Now, I had a question for you. I was watching I did not watch the Tigers game last night because there was a certain hockey game on that we just talked about ad nauseum. In that game, you had Doug Fister turn in another terrific performance, but for the second straight game, he had 0 run support from this Tigers lineup. And similar to the Penguins not scoring, you have big marquee guys in this lineup. I know they're without Austin Jackson for a month, but two guys in particular, Miguel Cabrera and Prince Fielder. And we'll talk about something that's unacceptable. For myself as a Tigers fan, as I'm sporting my road Tigers hat at the moment, for them to have already been shut out 6 times this season, if you extrapolate that out, that's going to be 18 times this year. Versus they were only shut out, you know how many times they were shut out last year?
Twice.
3 times.
3 times.
3 times. Already doubled that so far with this lineup, with the addition of a guy named Torrey Hunter. I think that is something that is unacceptable. And I was going to ask you your...
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous.
Right.
They also lead the league in most times scoring 10 runs or more.
That's kind of a conundrum, isn't it? It's
so
funny.
They either have all the run prediction,
it's feast or famine, yeah.
Or they have none of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that they've done that 3 times where they have 10 runs or more, which is, it's either...
I know they put up a 17 spotter on the Astros.
Right, and it's either tied for the lead or it is the lead. I can't remember which one. But regardless, it makes the point. And that's something that needs to be addressed. And it's obviously not a hitting problem because it's just a matter of they get all their hits in one game. So they're either getting shut out or they're just laying the lumber on somebody, just taking it to them. And that's a problem because in the first game of the Rays series, they scored 10 runs. They went 10-1. And then the second game, you lose 3-0. And you probably have a better pitching performance in the second game than the first game. So, granted, the starting pitching has been phenomenal.
All right, Fister went out there and took... gave him no runs till the 9th inning. He ultimately gave up 3 runs to his name.
And I would argue that right now, judging by their last 3 or 4 starts, Verlander's the worst pitcher on this staff.
Yeah, and isn't that something to say? I mean, that really
Even
is.
worse than Porcello
right,
in the last 3 or 4 starts.
That's something, and you talk about, and that's, it can be infuriating when, Crosby doesn't put the puck in the net, and you expect, you know what I mean? And everybody has an off night, and that's why, when we talk about, to our last segment, when Crosby doesn't do well in game 2. But to then consistently not do well, for Verlander to have really kind of 2 kind of bad starts, a third so-so start, and he ultimately gets to win the 4th one, that's something that you don't expect for a guy that you're, paying a ridiculous amount of money, and who, just like you ask me, is Crosby the best player in the league? And I would venture to say probably is. Is Verlander the best pitcher in the game? He probably is.
Yeah, he definitely is.
But
the difference is when it comes, when the slump happens. If it happens in the playoffs,
that's a good point.
That's worse than when it happens in a quarter of the way through the regular season.
But at the same time, many people will argue that when it comes to bigger stages, Verlander himself has not always produced.
Right, which there will be more sample size created probably this year,
hopefully,
and over the coming years.
And we both agree.
We
both agree if Verlander is to go down as one of the best pitchers in the game to ever ever to toe the slab in the history of baseball. And especially in my opinion, I believe that he needs to not only win a World Series, but he needs to be the guy that wins a World Series. Like, be the ace that wins Game 1 and Game 4 and Game 7 in a World Series, puts the team on his back, and he's the reason that, the Detroit D...
And that you think he needs to do that in order to go down as being Nolan Ryan, Cy Young, guys like that.
Right, to be...
But I don't think he has to do that to make the Hall of Fame.
Oh, and not that he's like a lock already, but you would kind of think that when you win the MVP and Cy Young in the same year, especially given baseball, I mean, baseball has guys in the Hall of Fame for what they do over the course of like 3-4 years in certain instances. Right. Yeah, you would think that so far he's already done enough.
From the starting pitching perspective, even though Verlander has not been Verlander-esque, which is a term that's been developed in Detroit, Max Scherzer has been. He is 8-0 with a .89 whip, which is walks and hits per innings pitched, which pretty much if you're below 1, you're doing pretty well. And he has an even 100 strikeouts on the season, which is incredible. And he has a 3.24 ERA. So even though Verlander isn't giving you that Verlander performance, Max Scherzer is giving you that Verlander performance, and therefore there's no excuse for this record right now.
Right. And I would agree. And this is, it's kind of an interesting segue from our last topic, because this kind of bothered me. And maybe I am too much of a homer when it comes to guys like Crosby and Malkin, that it doesn't bother me as much, especially when you've seen things that they've done, and especially since I've seen Crosby and Malkin give me as a fan a championship, if that makes sense. But that goes back to our topic. Something that really bothered me last night is I was working overnight last night, and so after the game, I saw some of the highlights from the Tigers game. I happened to see them. And I didn't realize that in the game, Joe Madden, who's considered one of the best managers of baseball, but he's kind of out there in some of his techniques, he intentionally walked Miguel Cabrera twice. Once to then have 2 base runners, once to load the bases, to bring up a guy named Prince Fielder, who you're paying $30 million a year almost. And both times, Mr. Prince Fielder struck out.
Yeah. And Prince has been good following a Cabrera walk for prior in the season.
But
both
times it was against right-handed pitching. And if you look at Baseball Reference right here, you know what he's batting first of all against left-handed pitching.
I don't.
373 this year, which is incredible. But if he's facing right-handers, 242.
And that has to do with a lefty-righty matchup.
Right, and because he's a lefty power hitter. Right. But that, to think if that happens later in this series, or I'm sorry, in this season, that if, not that that's going to be like a blueprint to beat the Tigers, but if we're sitting there in Game 1 of the World Series, and they're playing somebody, and the manager for the opposing team decides to walk right now the best hitter in the game, some say the best player, I would readily admit he's the best hitter in all of baseball right now. To then bring up someone who is probably in the discussion for being one of the best hitters in the game, but then for him to just not step up like that, that is something that really, I think, why are you paying him all that money? You bring him in.
I mean, it's 2 at-bats.
I understand.
And it's the regular season. And baseball's a game about failure.
Right.
And every 100 bats, if you strike out, or not strike out, but don't get on base 70 times, you're doing pretty good.
Right.
So,
and I understand. And I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to overblow. And it's, it goes back, with hockey, you kind of put one in for every 10 to 15 shots you put up. And that's why hockey's much more of a flowing game, and that's why I said that. And regardless, back to the past topic. But with baseball, you're absolutely right. You fail 2/3 of the time, they think you're doing a good job. But with Prince Fielder, I think that you can't have managers maybe see that and then think that can be done. Prince Fielder should make them pay.
Right. And
he should line one into right and get 2 guys to score when that happens.
The other thing is when it happens twice in one game.
Absolutely.
You'd think it'd wake you up after the first time.
Right.
And we saw that today. That's kind of a competitive edge. Like you need that competitive edge when you're an athlete.
Because I believe it happened in like the 5th inning and then the 8th inning.
Right. And you would think when you come up to that bat in the 8th inning and they just did the same thing and you didn't make them pay the 5th inning, where's that competitive edge of I'm going to make them pay?
And it's one thing, and this goes back to this is why I'm more frustrated with this. And I have become a big Tigers fan this past couple years. It's one thing to like hit the post 3 times and you'll be like so close. But it's a completely another thing to just strike out. If Prince Fielder both times like hit him and like got robbed of a home run and like to the warning track, you're like almost. Like Cabrera almost won that game a while back where he's done that like twice this year, like to the warning track. And it's like, almost. But to strike out once on 4 pitches, you can't do that.
Right.
You just can't do that. And I get more fired up about this. That's why Malkin hits the post 3 times.
You get more fired up about a Prince fielder striking out twice in a regular season baseball game.
And I understand, but that's it's you're like so close to that. You understand that? And that's I don't want this to become a like I said, like a blueprint, and that's why it kind of worries me. And it segues into the thing that I open up this segment with, in that they have been shut out 6 times. So going forward, I was going to ask you, there's a couple things in play here. Where we've already approached the halfway point almost of the season. Like we're coming close to it.
Yeah, the All-Star game's in 3 weeks or a month.
And then after that, in a week, really a week, 10 days after that will be the deadline. So that's like in about a month. So looking at this team right now, we talk about the Penguins are a team that played to win now, and they made the moves necessary to show that mindset.
Is what the Tigers are doing.
Right. So if you're the Tigers right now, if you're in the shoes of Dave Dombrowski, what moves? Obviously, Prince Fielder is, you pay him all this money, you're not going to move Prince Fielder. That doesn't, and I've heard that said by people. That doesn't make any sense. But
no, your major piece is in the minor leagues at AAA Toledo, and it's Nick Castellanos.
Mm-hmm. And he's right now. I have an interesting stat for him. Over the past 21 games, he's batting over .350, and he has 6 home runs, which he started off the season terribly, and that's why Toledo's like second to last in the International League or whatever, because they can't hit. But he's kind of turned it up as of late.
Which is what you need before the trade deadline for a guy like him.
I don't think it would come to a point where you would bring him up and maybe in the place of a Dirks, or if since Jackson's still out and they don't even know when his rehab assignment's going to be.
Garcia's playing well.
Right.
And the problem is that Don Kelly is Leland's boy.
But if you are the Detroit Tigers, there's a reason that, when the Penguins didn't settle, they got Jerome McGinley. I don't think you can sit there and say, oh, well, Avisail Garcia is going to be on the World Series roster starting again. Like, he's playing well. He's a young guy, but is that a guy that he didn't really do well in the World Series last year? He was on the playoff roster. This is a team, there's a couple places I would address. And that's what I was kind of asking you. For me, one is, and I know this might sound outlandish, is maybe at the catcher position, because Alex Avila has not exactly had the strongest year. You have Brian Pena as the backup, but if you could pick up a guy who's a catcher somewhere else who can actually maybe like hit above .250, which is, as a catcher, that's kind of, you can only ask so much. That's something that I would maybe want. Also, that if you could pick up like a corner outfield, like we were saying, Torrey Hunter and Austin Jackson are probably going to be set on your World Series roster. But you have this rotation of, you have Dirk sometimes, you have Donnie Kelly sometimes, you can have whoever, Danny Worth might come up there. I would maybe like to pick up, because that's someone you can maybe get as a cheap commodity, because there's a lot of those, and you could pick them up at the deadline. And then last but not least, with this big story that broke last night, really, the Johnny Peralta situation. Right. His name is on a list of players that were involved with this Miami clinic called Biogenesis, and headlining that list is Alex Rodriguez, who's one of the best players of my lifetime.
Johnny Peralta's on the
Ryan
list.
Braun, who was an MVP 2 years ago. But Peralta being on that list, he's been one of your best hitters this year.
Yep.
I mean, Cabrera is blowing the whole league out of the
water. He's leading the AL shortstops in batting average.
But if he, I don't think a suspension is going to be handed out relatively soon, but if he all of a sudden gets a 50 gamer or, a 100 gamer, I would want to address that situation. And this is kind of a side question to that. If Johnny Peralta, he's only on a 1-year contract, if he were to get a 50 or 100 game suspension, do you think that ends his career in a Tigers uniform?
I think, that would be a decision that has to be made. It wouldn't bother me if they brought him back, because I'm all about winning, and if he gives you the best chance to win, so be it. And we've talked about this before. I think everybody cheats. I really do.
Right.
I think every team has at least one guy that cheats.
Right, and I guess I understand that you're not gonna fault him for cheating and say, hey, this is why we're not going to bring him back.
I'm not like, he's a bad guy.
Exactly, and I understand
him,
that. The reason that I would not bring him back is that, I mean, he's 31 right now. He's going to turn, he's almost, or he just turned 31, so it'd be like 32. And if he's a guy that is going to be a year out of baseball, basically, because he's a guy that if he were to lose 50 games or 100 games, if I'm in charge, I don't bring him back for the playoffs.
Right. Well, and that also points to you don't really have that great of a farm system.
Oh, absolutely not.
You don't.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, Nick Castellanos doesn't play shortstop.
Right.
So
exactly. That's a good point.
You're going to need to make a trade if that happens. So in terms of your first question that you asked me, and what positions would I be looking to fill if a trade happens at the trade deadline, I think you're still looking at closer because I don't like Jose Valverde, and not that many people do.
And I was going to bring that up, but I was initially addressing was the offense. But that's a good point because
I think
there's some holes on this team,
right,
and I think that's one of your biggest ones.
Right, closer, and then a relief pitcher would not be bad either. But those are not minor. Closer is definitely a major role.
A favorite of both the hosts of this show, Al Albuquerque, is struggling mightily right now with the Mud Hens, and it's really come out of nowhere. He can't. He's walking a ton of batters. He still kind of has his lofty strikeout rates, which he was kind of known for, as is most of this pitching staff.
But you can't walk guys in the majors because they'll make you pay.
At the relief position.
Right. The other one I would be looking at is if Johnny Peralta is, suspended or rumored to be suspended. Now you have a position that you can trade Nick Castellanos for. Because I think it'd be really tough to trade Nick Castellanos for a relief pitcher. That's not exactly what you're looking to get. So if you got a relief pitcher in like a combo deal where you traded away Castellanos and got a position player like maybe a left fielder, like you said, or even a catcher. But catcher and shortstop are probably the two hardest positions to trade for.
Exactly.
Because they're considered cornerstones of franchises.
That's why you'd have to...
Like Derek Jeter, like Matt Wieters in Baltimore, Posada used to be in New York.
Buster Posey.
Yeah, Buster Posey in San Francisco. Veritek on the Red Sox.
For the long, he was their captain for 10 years.
So shortstops and catchers are usually cornerstones of franchises. But let me give you a name for
Can I guess it? Because I think I was going to maybe say the same name. I
kind of put it on the computer. If you can.
Oh, you did?
Well, I didn't pull it up. But if you can.
I was going to say, because to that point is that you're going to maybe need someone who's towards the further side of their career.
Right.
When you pick up pieces at the deadline when you're making a title run, it's different than addressing a need and saying, like, we need to fill this. Right. Because a team's not going to give up that cornerstone guy.
Right. You're not going to go get Starlin Castro from the Marlins.
And that's when you see that at any deadline deal. That's why Iginla's a Penguin. Because he's the captain of a team. You're not going to... You see this in all the sports, though. And I'm trying to think of a baseball one right now.
How about Miguel Cabrera? That happens in the off season.
Right.
That's not a mid-season trade.
Exactly. You guys, and so a guy who's 36 years old plays the shortstop position is Jimmy Rollins in Philly.
That's exactly what I was.
He's a guy who's towards the further side of his career.
He's a lot stronger defensively than Peralta is.
Quicker, for sure.
And he's not having a good year. And the Phillies are like 7 games back.
And they lost Roy Halladay.
Right. So if you're looking for a team that could maybe give you one, because there's a lot of teams that aren't going to give you their shortstop. They're just not going to.
No.
So that would be a guy that you could look at as a possible target if you're really looking for a shortstop. But that all is completely dependent because Johnny Peralta is playing really well right now.
So staying on the shortstop thing, because the next question, we have these little side questions, and I asked you if you thought that would be the end of his career. What I want to know is how big of an impact do you think that'll have if Peralta, say in a month, like right before the All-Star game, it's handed down that he is done for 50 games, or albeit 100 games?
I think.
How big of an impact do you think that is to this Detroit Tigers outlook on this season?
I think it's a huge impact because last year we saw is you had the first 4 that were pretty good or really good, and now you even have an even better first 4 because you had Torrey Hunter. Victor Martinez has started to pick it up a little bit.
A bit.
He has 4 home runs on the season now. He hit one today.
But Victor Martinez is an interesting point because when he went down, that was going to be a big impact to that team. And what did they do? They picked up Prince Fielder.
Right,
so you were able to address that at the beginning.
Exactly.
But I think, my opinion is, the reason I think this would be a big opinion is because it happened smack dab in the middle of the season. And this goes back to why I was so frustrated, we both were, with the lack of a closer for this squad, and then the fact that they did it, it's like, hey, the season's about to start, and they're like, well, we don't have a closer.
Right.
Like, that's something you got to address.
But the other thing, it happened smack dab in the middle of the season, but it also happened smack dab in the end of your lineup,
right.
which without Johnny Peralta right now looks pretty bad.
Exactly, and it's a great point.
Besides Omar Infante, batting number 9,
right.
and Victor Martinez starting to pick it up at 5, but I would still include him in a struggling group.
Mm-hmm.
Your 5, 6, 7, 8 right now would be, without Johnny Peralta, would be Victor Martinez, Alex Avila, not necessarily in this order, Ramon Santiago, and Andy Dirks.
Yeah.
So that's not exactly what you're looking for to round out the lineup. And yes, Omar Infante is doing a great job at turning it over, getting it back to those all-stars that are the first 4.
Right. And a story that just came across NBC is that it just came across today a couple hours ago, is that if Johnny Peralta is to be suspended, it wouldn't happen until about the first week of July, because baseball apparently plans to interview all the players implicated in this list by the end of June. So then they would decide.
But you're still taking a big risk there.
Right, exactly. And so that's... And then my last question for you, because we both agree at big impact, would you make a move before you knew he got suspended? Like if it was murky, and I have an idea that probably Dave Dombrowski knows a lot more than we do, and
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Even Leland. But would you start the communication lines, right? Start making the calls now.
I would start right now. I'd start tomorrow.
And what if Philly, since they're out, but what if Philly said, you know what? We'll give you Jimmy Rollins for, like, I don't know, someone who isn't that good, like not Castellanos, but like a pitcher in Double-A. Would you immediately pull the trigger right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Because he's better than Ramon Santiago. Mm-hmm. So why not? Mm-hmm. And he's older, but you have that insurance,
yep.
And you see this in baseball a lot with the older guys. Change of scenery. Right. It helps. Right. It helps a lot.
Jimmy Rollins used to be, he's a perennial all-star. He used to be one of the better shortstops in the game.
And Chase Utley.
Right.
Were like
and Ryan Howard.
Dominant combo.
That's why they were in the World Series two straight years.
Yeah, Infante and Santiago reunion would look real nice. But, Santiago isn't an everyday player. He never has been. And if he was, he would be one right now. Because he's been with the Tigers for a long time.
10 years almost, yeah.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the show, but the NBA Finals starts tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I hate LeBron. You
hate
LeBron.
LeBron.
You give him more credit than I do, but
yes.
I think he's a flop artist. Just give me your prediction. We got 20 seconds
Heat
left.
in 5. Spurs won 1 game at home.
Heat in 5.
Yep, that's what I think's gonna
happen. Give me the
And
Spurs.
I hate it. I hate it.
Give me the Spurs in 6.
And I'm not saying that because I'm not cheering for LeBron. I just think that the Heat are gonna beat the old Spurs team.
You heard it here first. Spurs in 6. Give me Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. This is Sports Talk with Puckett and Pontzer. We hope you come back next week.